think that stories like these are going to be the first step for healing in our messy world. Your labor of love is a big key in that fight. I fully believe that storytellers like you are going to be the ones that change the world and make it a better place to live in. Hello everybody and welcome to Let's Fix Stories. I am Jaylon Gunduz. This is the show where OBA's team of editors sit down and talk with real writers about real stories in progress. We break down what's working, what's amazing, and brainstorm ways together to make manuscripts even better. And unfortunately, the rest of the 1 Billion Arc Story team is not here today. Life got in the way, but I'm super excited to get to be chatting with Parth. We met on Substack. I came across his Substack, and I'm really grateful that you're here today. I think that this story that you're writing, it was serialized on Substack where I found it, but I believe that it's a particularly powerful story and one that will touch a unique pain that a lot of people carry, and I think that it offers some healing that we all need. So, I will let you take it over. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your story, and what led you to write Karam's Legacy?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you for saying what you said, because obviously as a writer, like the main thing is like you have people reading it, people are impacted by the story. So my name is Parth Shah. I was born and raised in New York, and parents to immigrants from India, and I've basically wanted to be a writer my whole life. And I think many immigrants will probably have this chapter in their lives where they go up to their parents. So I basically during college, I was like, all right, well, my dad was like, okay, so what do you want to major in? I was like, creative writing. My dad was like, no. He's like, you gotta do like a doctor or a lawyer or something. I ended up going to business school, so I kind of just followed that track. But I was always like, I never like really stopped writing. I would write short stories, I'd write scripts here and there, but I never like had the time to actually just sit down and write. So that time came after my daughter was born. I was on paternity leave, so I had a lot of downtime. Sometimes in the middle of the night, like when you have to feed the child and everything, and you're like you can't get back to sleep. So I just started writing the story. And before this, so Karam's Legacy is essentially, I like to call it vigilante fiction, but I've been writing about like cops and vigilante and a lot of action stuff, like half novels, short stories, things like that for many years. So that's like the world that I know. So that's really where this specific story started, and this was back in 2021.
So, why this story? Why now?
So the first version of the story was really just going to talk about a main character named Karam who lost his father at a young age, and he's just trying to deal with that. And he uses martial arts as a way to get in touch with his father. As the story continued, I wrote a full first draft of the novel, which is actually really short. It wasn't even like, but it was surprising because it was like 20,000 words, and I had never written that much in my life. But I had this great villain that I created, and all these different events, and I said, this is okay. This is a decent first draft, but I want to go a little deeper. But so really, there's some big themes, but the big theme is definitely like this relationship between a man and who's lost his father at a young age, and I think it speaks to anyone who, even if you haven't really lost a father, but if you've had like a missing parent in your life, it's going to impact you a certain way. And so I was trying to get all that stuff out on paper. So really that's really the crux of what this novel is about.
Sounds like it was a really personal story in a way, and that's why it resonated so deeply with me when I read it. And I haven't lost a father, thank the Lord, yet, but there is that sense of legacy that you talk about in this story is definitely relatable to everyone in their own way, and it hits different. So one more question. Where do you hope this story will go? Do you have any plans or dreams of where you want it to go once it's done?
Yeah, so at this point, I'm like very grateful that I have people reading it. I'm not trying to. This isn't something like a Harry Potter where I'm like, I'm gonna be so big. But I think for me, a big accomplishment would be to finish the novel and to tell the story that I want to write. Because as I'm writing this, I'm thinking about three other variations of this, where I write a specific story around the villain and his whole arc, how he became the way he is. I want to write about Amir, his father, Karam, and how, what that legacy is all about. And then the specific novel I'm writing would actually end up being a two-part, because the events that I have right now and the way the story is going, I'm on chapter 17. And I'm like kind of just still scratching the surface of all the events I want to unfold. So it's like a 4-book series that I'm thinking in my head. And really, if I can finish that, and even if I have it for free on Substack, like that to me, that's amazing.
It's amazing. I think writing in general is a labor of love, and you write for yourself first, and that's what gives it its first power. And then after you've gotten to that point, once you've written the story that you need to tell and you've told it to yourself, then being able to let it get out there and bless others truly is, I mean, like I said, a labor of love. That's a sacrificial thing that you're doing, and it's a great mission. So I'll give you a chance to, just so that our audience can have a better idea of what we're talking about diving into in this session, give a quick 2 to 3 sentence synopsis of the story so far. I know that's always hard because talking about our own stories really stinks, so I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, it's cool. So Karam's legacy is about Amir, who's the protagonist, whose father's name is Karam. And Karam was a vigilante in New York City. And now Amir is trying to deal with this idea of him finding out that his father was a vigilante, and he uncovered something. So that's the big mystery here. He potentially uncovered something that potentially got him killed. And Amir himself is a NYPD officer. And so he's also has this moral quandary about his father was doing things that might have been outside of law, and he has a lot of thoughts in his head. On the other hand, we have a very strong and dangerous antagonist who his name is Rashid, and he himself has a father who passed away, and he knows what he wants to do. He knows everything about his father, and he has everything in place, and he's literally controlling everything. You think about, if you enjoy Marvel movies, think about Kingpin, who has everything, under his fingertips. He's a very long-term thinker. He's a mastermind. And there's a connection between these two characters, and they're literally on a collision course. And yeah, that's as short as I can get with this synopsis.
I love it. It's very exciting to read, very exciting to hear about. So let's dive in. Usually what we do, we'll start with a disclaimer, because we're editors, but we're a different kind of editor. We like to make it more about a conversation, because we recognize that editing is a conversation, and the power should never be taken away from the writer to tell the story that they want to tell. And also, storytelling and writing itself is by definition a subjective art form. So, any information that we give, it comes from a professional opinion, but it's only one opinion. And so that's why I usually love when we have all of our other team members here. But again, today it's just me. So for now, I have some notes from Charles that he very kindly left me. So yeah, I will be reading from Charles' notes and also giving my own, but this is a conversation. So if you have any information and you want to jump in and give your perspective, that will inform my perspective and help me give better notes, and it will also just make sure that we're not getting away from the story that you need to tell, because it's your story. So there's our disclaimer. Feel free to jump in at any point. So we'll start with what is working. I will start by reading Charles' notes, because he gave a really good overall. Said, this is a very well-constructed story that, to me, rings of a martial arts story starring brown folk, which absolutely tickles me. He says this as a Latino himself. The main issue is the exact wording of details, sometimes too unrealistic, sometimes not realistic enough, and sprinkled with just a few technical issues, but those are copy edits, which is exactly where you're supposed to be in this drafting process. So it's nothing that isn't already present when a story does end up with editors.
Okay.
And he did say this was one of the breeziest entries he has read so far. He felt entertained, and he said it scratched his particular interest niche and was a very fun and promising story for him. So he really loved the martial arts action cop story, the vigilante story that you're talking about. Said the tone is palpable and genuinely entertaining, which is really great because if that's something that you're passionate about, you can really tell it comes out very easily in your story. He was excited to find out what the connection between Rashid and Amir is, and the cop murder being hushed up. He really thought that Rashid's father was interesting too, especially his store. He said that was one detail that really stuck out to him personally and was interesting. And I found it interesting because I happen to, my background being my grandfather was the honorary consul general in Boston from Turkey. And he also had a store and was kind of a central point for helping immigrants get settled in the new country. And he said a personal detail, though his brownness hails in the Western Hemisphere, he still really likes seeing this kind of story involving brown dudes that hits in the best of ways. I feel bad reading that from my perspective because I have a different face, but that is genuinely from his heart. He thought the line, "not exactly a leap in logic," was funny, and "just teeth and threat" was a fantastic description. Said he would love to see more lines like this, blending the grit and poeticism that will bring the story up to even greater heights. So that wraps up Charles's notes. I'll jump into some of my thoughts. Immediately, what stuck out to me was your first sentence. I really loved the great setting transportation. It was relatable, because a lot of people know the subway experience. But it was also shocking because you mentioned smells that are immediately cause a visceral response to people. And by involving those different senses in just a short sentence, you immediately plot people right into the world of your story, and it makes them feel like they're there watching things unfold. So that was a really great way to just be immediately pulled into the story. The line that hit me after that was, there was a time he hadn't stepped in. A woman had screamed that time, and he was too slow. He wasn't going to let that happen again. And I feel like that was a very strong backstory moment. And you did this a few times, where I noticed you had a great way of dropping backstory so that we can understand why Amir reacts the way that he does. It's not info dumping, but you have a way of it doesn't take us out of the present action, but you give brief hints of what informs Amir's present, and that brings emotional connection to the story for us. It makes us feel very invested in this character. I really appreciated your layered depiction in the bullying with Jag being Sikh and not one of the Hispanic or white students at his school. I think bullying, it's a cruelty that seldom makes sense, but it comes from warped perceptions that are just kind of pushed onto us by the culture. And that's what allows the space for bullying. So a fun note on that detail that Charles wrote. A fun fact, he was attending a panel with a renowned voice actor, Billy West, and he commented on stage, "Every one of my childhood bullies are either dead, in prison, or cops." So he said that might be a fun detail you might wish to explore, just to add some fun.
I think, last chapter closes that loop of what happened to that bully. I mean, the last chapter I wrote, not the last chapter. The latest one kind of closes that loop, and you understand why he was bullying. And it's true, like, all three of those bullies are basically in a bad space. Like, they're just not good guys. And, I really, like, the first version of that whole thing was he exacts his revenge, and that's it. Rashid exacts his revenge, and that's it. But this new version, I'm almost thinking about how can this person now use that situation and turn that person onto his side, and then be sort of this mastermind again. So I'm trying not to like ruin everything for people, but like if you read chapter 17, you'll understand like how he's able to do that.
I love those full circle moments, and I think that's going to get on something else that I touched that's really strong in this story about there's an understanding that you bring that helps people have empathy for these characters, no matter how they might categorize them with our preconceived notions. You really subvert the prejudice that culture puts on us and teaches us to see through as a lens. And I think that when we truly understand people's stories and we have those full circle moments, that just helps us to have that moment of connection because we can understand them. We can put ourselves in their story and see what pain has led them to be the way that they are. So that's something really strong that you're doing in your story. Those full circle moments I love them. They're so great. The other thing that I really loved was your call to adventure with the reporter calling up the topic of Amir's father and then handing him a name in a folder was so strong. I felt mystery vibes, and putting myself in Amir's shoes, I would not have been able to resist that call to action moment. My curiosity would not have let me turn it down. So that was very strong, again, pulling your readers in, making them excited to see where this goes. The other thing that stood out to me, this is kind of a theme, but you wrote the oldest is supposed to be the honor of the family, the protector, a type of second father. Coming from a Middle Eastern cultural background myself, but also to a lesser degree it's present in American culture, I relate strongly to the truth of this statement. I've seen this pressure, and I've seen it affect a lot of eldest sons and daughters. As an eldest daughter myself, I've seen a lot of them break under the privilege of responsibility and also abuse that privilege of responsibility. And the conflict of legacy is what the story is all about, and it's based on an emotional truth that's relatable to all people. So again, that's what makes the core of this story so strong. That's what makes it such an important story for you to tell.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. I didn't even think about how important that scene was, because I mean it comes from every single, both characters, Amir and Rashid, have elements of me in them, obviously. So my dad also had a convenience store in the city for 35 plus years. Kind of what I was alluding to earlier, he also worked 18-hour days, so he's still alive, he's kicking, he's amazing. Taking care of my granddaughter. I mean, his granddaughter. But it's you feel that absence in your life, and so that's also part of the big theme in the story. And I'm also the oldest. Also, I have one younger sister, and so all that emotion comes into play, and trying to understand how to express that the best way possible is what and I think actually writing it from a serialized perspective, and I would give this advice to people, writers who are struggling with thinking novel wise. Maybe not, don't think novel wise, think story by story, because I think that's really that publishing it chapter by chapter actually enhanced and allowed me to take my time with each chapter and really have these things that I wanted to express in each chapter.
Yeah, kind of let the natural subconscious come to light of the creative process. I can relate to that process. There's a lot of times you have to really sit with a story and focus on the little details of emotion. If you focus on the little details of technical edits, you can drive yourself insane. That's what editors are for, so that you don't go insane looking at your own work for too long. Yeah, giving yourself space. I like that tip. That's a good tip for anyone struggling with writer's block.
But actually, I do that. I don't know if it's an editing thing, but I definitely write and rewrite my stuff so many times.
It's definitely a common experience for writers. That's how you know you're a true writer. You have the imposter syndrome and you get stuck in the details, for sure. All right, the last thing that I had is kind of another theme thing, but when Rashid's father ended up in the jail and trying to free his son, Munir, he had said in the interrogation room with that one cop, he had seen this playbook before, back home in different uniforms with different flags. And I think that's one of the places where, I mean, it came out immediately in your first chapter, but seeing such a strong commentary, but also an emotional commentary on pride that fuels racism and prejudice. And it comes from the fact that it comes from forgetting the fact that at the end of the day, we're all human. No one's better than anyone else. No one is less prone to taking advantage of systems meant to maintain fairness. And we all have to fight to avoid falling into corruption. And I think that there's a certain type of pride that's too rampant in especially Western culture. And it makes me sad to be a part of, sad to see. But I love how stories like this are helping us to see it from another perspective. So hopefully we can start changing these narratives that have caused so much pain in our world for so long.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, my parents are from India, and Rashid's family is from Pakistan, but at one point Pakistan and India were the same, and so also that history of of hate between the two nations, and even within the nations, of just like hate between different religions and castes, and how it like kind of manifests in the power centers of each separate country. I am a bit of a history buff, and like I like politics, but it's also like really annoying to write about politics, or all that stuff, because so much of it is like the headline of the day. And so I think the best stories I read were like in college. I took this Middle Eastern literature class, and it was like I learned about how writers would take events that are happening at that time. Like one of the books I read were called I don't know if you're familiar with this book, but it's called Beirut Nightmares. And it was all like stream of conscious about like all the stuff that was happening. And I remember, don't remember the events because it was so long ago I read that book, but I still remember the emotions. I still remember the fear and the way this writer was writing. And so, all these different topics that I'm bringing into the story, and clearly racism is definitely one of the underlying themes of the book, but I want to be able to express those things without being preachy or like, biased in one way or another. Like I just want to, give my commentary in with that emotional depth.
I think you've definitely done that. I especially love the power of stories in this way because it does allow you to speak to the emotions, which, as you pointed out, those are really the stories that stick with us. Those are the things that actually make a difference in our lives, is when something can touch us on an emotional level and speak honestly to the humanity in us. We all forget eventually the headline of the day, even though it'll cause so much dissent immediately when it comes out. Eventually we'll forget about it. It won't make us feel anything anymore. But these kinds of stories, you can forget the plot, but you won't forget how it made you feel. And that's what makes a lasting difference. That's why we write stories. That's why it's such a powerful form of communication. And I think that storytellers will be the ones to change the world because no other form of communication has that power, reaching your emotions so well. So, again, you're doing an amazing labor of love in writing this story. It's a story that needs to be written. So I love getting to talk about it with you and talk about how to make it even better. I'll start with, again, Charles' notes. We'll jump right into some things that we saw that can maybe help you on your next round of edits for improvement, making it even a stronger story that connects with people even more. Charles's first note was the broken windows theory. It was just presented with an explanation for the reader, but he suggested explaining this theory in general, but not clinically. So define the term, but then suck us into the atmosphere by that definition. So in other words, present a definition that only your story and your characters could deliver. Have them show the definition, not just have a narrator kind of pop in and explain the definition. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Another small detail he caught was the opening thug says, in that manner. So, like, don't refer to me in that manner. He felt, unless this comes from a true place, and even then maybe specify the origin a little bit more, but he felt like no thug talks like that. So maybe, when details like that come up, maybe just focus in your next round of rewrites on giving different voices that are authentic to each person and where they come from. So maybe that person would say, instead of don't talk to me in that manner, maybe something like, best be shut in your face talking like that, or keep talking to me like that, see what happens, or you don't talk to me like that, traitor. Different voices like that, you can immediately draw a different picture of a person in your head. So that's just another quick details that are for after you've written the story and are ready to go back and do rounds of editing. That's where you focus on them. So this will just be a note that will help you know what to focus on with those small fixes. And then to keep the action tone while organizing some elements better, you could revise your style, your writing style a little bit, as far as use tighter, smaller sentences while still fleshing out your New York City. So your characters still let you know how the city feels, especially from that minority background, while keeping your straightforward style, but maybe use more direct sentences. So for example, when 9/11 is mentioned, make that title feel heavy on the English is weird. Make that title feel heavy on the reader. Make them understand that this is not just a historical event to these lead characters, but it's a reality. It's a curse that they have inherited and they cannot escape. So for example, a rewrite he suggested just to kind of get your wheels turning. Then 9/11 happened. He thought all these years later there would be nothing more to say about him and towers he rarely saw as a boy. But the screams of those dead are long, and the scars given to him run longer. So just another way of helping your readers to experience New York City as real as your characters have and as real as you have because you grew up there. Another note, be sure, this was from his perspective. I haven't noticed it in a ton of the stories that I've read, but he really liked the way that your scene with, the New York cop getting lectured by their boss. He feels like he's seen that type of scene a lot, the cop getting lectured by their boss. So he said, make sure that you lean even more into finding a way to make us forget all the parodies of such a scene and make it feel fresh. Because he felt like it had the makings of such a fresh take, and that's why he wanted you to push even further into pulling that realism from the New York City cop culture, life, and operations, make the background details pop even more and seem even more realistic. Especially, he said he would love to see even more of the martial arts perspective, which I assume is, coming down the line as well, since we only read the first 10K words to get an idea of where this is going.
Yeah, so that scene was actually very difficult for me to write, just because it required me to really try to plan this whole mystery ahead of time, and and I think when I put that scene together, and sort of the switcheroo between him, so he's supposed to go and meet the commissioner, but then he can't meet the commissioner. I wanted to create this sense of okay, the people that we think are in charge aren't actually in charge. That's kind of the take I wanted, in this. So I wanted to throw in an air of confusion. Obviously, Amir is angry, but he's also confused. He doesn't know what's going on. So I definitely appreciate that note, and I can take another look at that scene.
When I read it, I felt that air of confusion. I felt the little plot twist take on it where the people that you thought were in control weren't. And I think that that's part of what makes it so fresh, makes it feel like it's not just a plot point that happens in every other story in similar genres. It gives it a different purpose and a different feel. It kind of makes readers get sucked into the feeling and then they forget about other stories that it maybe sounds like because it's a new feeling for them. Yeah. The last note that Charles had was on the Hispanic cop near the sample's end. He felt like there was a little too much technical telling over showing in her description. So that's just another first draft, slight revision. Just make sure that in all of your details, again, most of this is in your details, make sure that you're showing the world through your character's perspective as opposed to just telling us some of the technical details. Because again, like you said, you want to really lean into that emotion, getting all those 5 senses involved and not just, this is information that I have to read and remember in order to keep up with the story. So that concludes Charles' notes. Again, you're right where you need to be with this first draft, and it's amazing that you're writing this serialized because I think a lot of us, half of us in our story team are plotters and half are pantsers. So, you just have a general idea and then you start writing and see where the story goes.
Yeah.
And I'm somewhere right in the middle. I need to know where the story ends. I need to know where we're getting to. But being able to write it in serialized fashion, that makes it hard to, when you go back, sometimes you forget some of the threads that you started. And then to connect them again, again, that's just a second draft thing. That's part of the writing process.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I didn't have that first initial draft, which was, once again, a lot shorter than what I have now, I think the serialized version would be a lot messier. But because I have that, I know the skeleton of the story, and I just feel like right now I'm filling in a lot of those details and just upping the drama and leaning into the themes that I wanted to lean in.
It kind of reminds me like pottery, where you have a general skeleton, and then when you want to add in all those details, you have to mold the clay up and then break it down and then mold it up again. You kind of have to do the same with stories when you start digging into those finer details of the drafts. You really got to break the story and see where it breaks, where it comes apart, and then tie it together even stronger. And during that process, sometimes you find even stronger threads or stronger connections that you didn't even think of before, but you wrote it in there because it was meant to happen. It needed to be part of the story, and your creative instinct told you that. As far as for me, I only had a few notes. One thing that I agreed with Charles's notes, and this was, I mostly noticed it in the first chapter. In the following chapters, I didn't notice it as much. But sometimes when your sentence structure, it was the same sentence structure every time. Sometimes that can get boring. So some sentences you want to vary their length, vary what kind of pacing you have in them, vary the structure enough so that your reader's eyes never have a chance to glaze over. Because if their eyes glaze over, then they stop reading. They stop paying attention. So one way around that, because everyone has a short attention span nowadays, and everyone gets tired of reading, unfortunately, is just varying your sentence length. It keeps each sentence looking unique and fresh so that your reader's eyes never have a chance to glaze over. The other thing that I noticed was some of the point of view switches had to be a little bit more clear. I got the sense that you were trying to write from third person point of view from Amir's perspective. Is that?
I mean, not the whole story. I mean, there is like a sense of like him having limited knowledge of certain things, right? But it's not like the whole thing is in first person. Amir, no.
So some of those point of view switches, like where you're writing as if the story is being experienced through Amir's eyes, and then sometimes it switches to like halfway through a chapter, or kind of randomly it seems like it'll switch to a different perspective. In chapter 2, we started seeing the story through Amir's perspective, and then when he was leaving Mason's room, it almost sounded like we started seeing the story from Mason's perspective with his knowledge. And in that instance particularly, it just seemed like you needed to be a little bit more direct with some of your pronouns. So switch out one of those he's with a name so that readers don't get confused over whose eyes they're seeing from. But then it happened again in chapter 5, where we switched from Rashid's eyes to Munir's eyes. And in those cases, there were some times where you did that where it was very effective. Like there was an entire chapter dedicated to someone else's point of view. And that's totally fine. You just want to make sure that you have that in a whole nother section so that it doesn't seem like a jarring thing for readers and then they get confused over where they are in the story.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
Again, just one of those little details, and point of view and perspective and tense are always things that I get mixed up, and I can never see it in my own writing. I always need someone else to point it out for me. So again, that's why editors are here. That's why it's our job to make sure that you don't have to obsess over these tiny details.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think the thing I struggle with a lot is where I'm trying to insert that little sort of commentary of like what's going on and like Amir's thinking this. But then I do actually want to introduce like the alternative idea of like, for example, the chapter with when you have the whole action with Rashid, and you have the whole thing about this is the dynamic between the two brothers, but at the end you kind of see Munir looking over, and I wanted to get his thoughts in there as well.
Yes.
So
in that
always
sense,
trying to figure out how to do that best.
I would almost say put a chapter break in there, because then that signifies to your readers that they're prepared to jump, kind of. You're prepared to jump into hyperspace, and switch perspectives. That's what I like to use chapter breaks for. I do really love the idea of stories that are told from both the protagonist and the antagonist perspective. I think that that's a very strong storytelling technique, and again just underscores the we tell stories in order to teach each other empathy. We teach you how to understand a perspective that's different from your own. What makes people do the things that they do, because they have experienced something different than you have. And if we read a story and experience something through someone's eyes, we have a better sense of understanding someone who's like them when we meet them in real life. And then the last note that I had was in the scene where Amir's mother called him on the phone. It seemed like the phone call was never wrapped up. We kind of got taken out of the action with a trip down memory lane, and then it kind of seemed like the action moved on and the phone call got forgotten. And I think that him having that feeling of like someone was watching him while he's on the phone was really cool. But I forgot that he was on the phone, because it was like we went down this trip down memory lane, and it almost seemed like he had hung up the phone while I was on memory lane or something.
Yeah.
So just following through with that plot point. And that's the end of my notes. So do you have any thoughts, questions?
Yeah. So I have one belief that I think like all the strong stories that I've read or saw like have all of them have a really really strong villain where the villain almost seems like a crazy formidable guy that the hero cannot win at all.
Mhm.
I think I've achieved that, but I feel like I haven't given Amir that depth he needs, that development he needs. I haven't really, maybe I haven't explained the stakes properly. I just feel like compared to Rashid especially, or maybe just the fact that he's supposed to be a protagonist, I don't think like he just seems really weak,
Mm.
so I wanted to get your take on that.
I think so. The story structure that we developed to use with One Brilliant Arc, we kind of took pieces of story structures that we've seen work really well for everyone and kind of combined it into a unique thing. And one of the core pieces that we like to start with when designing characters is what's their weakness and what's their strength, because everyone has a unique set of strengths and weaknesses. And a fully fleshed out character will have both, like you said. Within a story, when you have a certain theme or a certain lesson that you're trying to teach through your story, tying in a specific weakness that your character has, make it kind of a question of whether they will lean into their weakness and accept it, or whether they're going to fight to move towards a strength. Because that's going to make all the difference at the climactic moment, whether it's a tragedy, whether it's a tragic character arc and they end up being more damaged than they started, or whether it's a happy ending character arc, or in technical terms, a comedic character arc, where they end up even stronger than they were at the beginning. One thing that I think that I saw a strength and a weakness for both Amir and Rashid, and I think you're right. If you lean into it even more, make it even more obvious, it could make the story even better.
Mm-hmm.
For Amir, I think you mentioned it, like he doesn't really know what to do. He doesn't know where he's supposed to go or what he's supposed to think. So leaning into that confusion and then set up what that confusion costs for him. If he stays in that state of indecisiveness and mystery, like not understanding what his legacy is or how he's supposed to live his life in light of that legacy, what's it going to cost him? What is he going to lose if he stays in that state? Versus what will he gain? What will he be able to accomplish if he moves into a strength of, fighting for the truth, fighting to discover the truth? If you make that even more of a question and make that get obvious that confusion and indecisiveness in his life isn't just something that niggles at the back of his mind, it's something that really cripples his life and takes out the meaning of his life. With Rashid, I feel like his strength is that he knows exactly what he wants to do with his life. He knows exactly what his purpose is. But obviously, it's not a very good purpose, because he's an antagonist, he's a villain. In a way, his strength is his weakness, because he knows exactly what he wants to do, but it's not a good thing to do. So in the end, it's going to be his downfall. So yeah, finding a way to name exactly what that strength is, and setting these two up as mirrors, setting your antagonist and protagonist up as mirrors, is a really awesome way to dig into this theme even more and illustrate even more the lesson that you're trying to teach through your story. So it's another thing that I love doing when I get to work with Jared, our founder, on his stories. That's something that we always set up in his stories is, we have 2 points of view. We write from the antagonist perspective and the protagonist perspective. And then we have them oftentimes as mirror images of each other. So I think that you're doing great. I think that the seeds are there. Again, as Charles was saying, just lean into it even more, because the seeds are there. You can trust your instinct as a writer and a creator and a storyteller, because this is really solid. These are solid skeletons. And I think that building it out is going to be even better.
Yeah, I like the idea of thinking about it like the two characters are mirror opposites of each other. That helps me out a lot, because I think it is true that like, okay, we have this one person that knows exactly what he wants. The other person doesn't know what he wants, and because of that reason, he's very impressionable. But he also has a skill of letting people in or leaving people out. And I think the conflict is going to be like, is he letting the right people in, or is he letting the wrong people in, and vice versa? Is he blocking out the right people or blocking out the wrong people? And then that also leads me to my second sort of struggle is I've got these two potential father figures in his life, Mason and Manfred. I haven't really devoted much information on them. I kind of want to, but then I also like it would actually take away a lot from the whole, the main crux of the story. Like I haven't figured out how to incorporate them without it just being derailed. So I don't know. I guess do you have any thoughts on that?
I did see in that scene with Mason, I saw, there was kind of that fatherly feeling there. There was a sense of, I mean, you mentioned it in one of the next scenes that you wrote, there was a protectiveness there. It didn't seem overbearing, it seemed professional, but it was definitely there. You could see that there was something more fatherly than just a boss with his employee. And for Manfield, I would really like to see some more scenes with him. I felt like he was a little bit more in the background, like we never really met him or understood what he meant to Amir. But I did catch that Amir ended up at the gym with him a lot, and also that was one of his key coping mechanisms. Whenever the confusion got really, really loud for Amir, he always needed to, he always mentioned wanting to go to the gym. So maybe just in one of those descriptions, you could also add something like he loved the gym with Manfield specifically so much because Manfield helped him bring clarity to that confusion, or he helped him know what to think about something, or get his thoughts, feelings, the turmoil inside of him out. So if he's associating the character of Manfield with relief and clarity for himself from the turmoil, I think that would immediately set him up in my mind as a stronger character and one that meant as much to Amir as you want him to.
That makes sense.
Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully
It
it
was.
helps you in your next rounds of rewrites. Any other last questions that we can answer for you moving forward, helping you know where to go next?
No, I think those are the two main ones.
Well, I'm glad that we had this chance to get to chat. The last thing that we do in these sessions is we just have a chance to go over the core theme that we saw emerging in the story, because as we established, the core emotional truth that you're writing about is the actual foundation of your story. It's what's really being said underneath the story itself. So I'll say what I found, and then I'll let you jump in with the theme that you wanted to come across and let me know if I picked up on the right things or if you were meaning to say something else. But we always want to take time to look at the theme because, again, that's where the real power in the story lies. So to me, I saw the theme jump out at me almost from the first chapter, which is always the right way to do it. You always want to mention the threads of your theme in the first chapter so that people immediately understand there's something deeper and a more important reason why they need to read your story. And it was in the line, all that remained was the echo of a fight he didn't want and a badge that felt heavier than ever. I think that speaks very much to both the prejudice and the legacy that you're unpacking in this very personal story. You're addressing a prejudice and an abuse of power that runs really deep, and yet it's not a specific prejudice that I see addressed in a lot of stories, and I think that it needs to be. Because again, there's so much of it, it damages so much of us, and it's a bold move to follow all of these messy threads down to the depths of ugliness that's in our humanity that we try to hide. But again, these are the stories that help bring clarity to us and help us have that understanding and connection that's actually going to change hearts and make it a better world for us to live in. So I saw the link to breaking the preconceived notions that society teaches us and addressing the way that we make assumptions about people. Not only is the story specific to a specific human, it's speaking to a unique pain that people with a certain background carry, but it's also a universal human emotion story. As we said, the experience of being the oldest sibling and being stuck with that responsibility and that pressure. I'm talking about legacy, about grit, about unfair systems that are designed to break all of us. The struggle between honor and toughness. Stories like these help us gain a better understanding and perspective of the challenges that other people face. It's a heavy challenge to be judged by the preconceived notions that society has taught us, by the way that you look or the way that you worship. That's a really heavy challenge to carry, in all of the challenges that humanity carries. So again, I saw an invitation in this story I saw an invitation for people who carry these burdens to experience validation and healing by seeing themselves in this story and going along the journey with these characters. You're also inviting people who don't recognize these burdens to have a deeper empathy for people who do. And I think that stories like these are going to be the first step for healing in our messy world. So your labor of love is a big key in that fight. And again, I fully believe that storytellers like you are going to be the ones that change the world and make it a better place to live in. So that's what I got from your story. I deeply appreciated reading it. I felt the passion that you were writing from. I felt how personal it was. I'm really excited to see where you take it and how much further it goes and how many other people it will touch.
Wow, that was powerful. A heavy burden, but yeah, I mean, I think you did touch a very important theme there, where definitely Rashid is trying to fix a broken system in his own way. He's become this sort of enforcer, like another authority figure that people can look to, because the cops and the system that were supposed to protect them have failed them and even hunted them, to be blunt. And then on the other hand, Amir's trying to do the same thing in his own way, where he's trying to be a different type of cop. So I think you definitely got it.
Well, again, this is a super strong story, not only at its core, at its emotional, thematic core, but I mean, also technically, as Charles said, the details of improvement that we touched on are all comments that we would find in any first draft. And it's all easily resolved and taken advantage of to tie those threads even stronger and make even stronger connections that support your core theme and support the character arcs that you're showing. And when the sample ended, I can say genuinely from both me and Charles, genuinely wanted to know the answers and see where this story was going. So again, it's another reason why I'm so glad that you're posting the serialized story on Substack. It's awesome to be able to read and to connect with, and I really hope that a lot of other people who listen to this also get to experience the story that you're sharing and have a chance to find that healing and connection there. With that all said, do you want to let our audience know where they can follow you, where they can hear more of your stories?
Yeah, I mean, it's a serialized novel it's karamslegacy.com, so that's where it is. And yeah, I don't really have any other social media, but that's the main thing over there. Yeah.
No social media is definitely the way to live these days.
Well, I have social media, but I'm not super active, so.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm happy for you that you get to not be burdened by that, because trying to run a business on social media is making me have to be involved in social media and active on social media, and it's not fun. It's not a fun place a lot of times. That's awesome, though. Thank you so much for sharing this story. Thank you for writing it, and thank you for taking this time to chat with us.
Yeah, thank you for your time, and thank you just for everything you guys are doing for authors. It's amazing.
Of course. And for any authors or writers listening, if you want your story to be on this podcast next, if you have a story that is in your heart or you're working on writing and you don't know where to bring it, there's a link in the show notes, and we'd love to bring you on the podcast next. So thanks for listening, everyone. Thank you again, Parth, for being here, and we'll talk to you all later.